Greetings, boils and ghouls and zombinaries. Today we're looking at some failed spin-offs from an outrageous media empire that changed the face of cable television.
What's your problem, soldier? You some kind of mummy's boy?
This is a tale with exciting highs, shocking lows, and one of TV's strangest sci-fi anthology shows. Get ready for a deep dive into Two-Fisted Tales, W.E.I.R.D, and Perversions of Science, the failed spin-offs of Tales from the Crypt.
What an intriguing notion.
It's a weird story that involves Brad Pitt, Kirk Douglas, William Shatner, Ed O'Neill, Joey Buttafuoco, and a freaky CGI robot. Join us as we look at the failed spin-offs of a hit HBO anthology series.
Trust me.
Plus, Tales from the Crypt writer-producer Alan Katz tells us what went wrong.
W.E.I.R.D was a catastrophe of its own.
It's Behind the Backdoor Pilot, Tales from the Crypt.
Now that's entertainment.
Welcome back to another edition of Atomic Abe's Behind the Backdoor Pilot. It's the series where we look at proposed projects that were shoehorned into episodes of existing TV shows to try to launch a spin-off. Like the episode of Married with Children that spent 30 minutes focused on a college radio station. That was a failed spin-off.
You can stop now.
The Atomic Abe channel is also home to Anthology of Anthology TV shows, where we look back at some famous and infamous series that featured a different story and different cast each episode. And today we've got a 2-for-1 because we're revisiting the failed spin-offs of Tales from the Crypt. The 1980s was a big decade for anthology TV. Steven Spielberg created amazing stories for NBC.
Just turn off the TV for once and come to bed.
CBS aired the new Twilight Zone.
I came home walking on the bodies of my friends. Now you think you know what that's like?
And a comedy anthology from Steve Martin titled The George Burns Comedy Week.
Don't you understand plain English? What's wrong with you people?
What do you mean, you people?
You can watch our video about that short-lived series right here on Atomic Abe. Premium cable was getting in on the act. Showtime had Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater. And HBO aired a late-night anthology that can only be called titillating. You guessed it, The Hitchhiker. In 1989, HBO was about to launch another anthology show for mature viewers. The series would bring an old comic book back from the dead. Let's take a quick look at the history of America's greatest horror comic, and we'll do it in 90 seconds. Go! Tales from the Crypt was a groundbreaking comic book from the early 1950s. Typically, these tales featured a person who commits a crime and gets away with it, only to face some kind of horrible comeuppance. For years, comic book writers had been publishing stories where good triumphs over evil. But after witnessing the events of the Second World War, those writers had to admit that a lot of cruel people get away with evil deeds. Sometimes you need a supernatural element to set things right. When the EC Comics horror titles debuted in 1950, they were an immediate success. With the exception of Superman, they were outselling every other comic book on the newsstand. First came The Crypt of Terror, soon retitled Tales from the Crypt. It became the biggest seller for EC Comics. That stood for Educational Comics. They later changed the name to Entertaining Comics. Followed by The Vault of Horror, Crime Suspense Stories, and The Haunt of Fear. Stories were introduced by 3 ghoulish narrators, the Vault Keeper, the Old Witch, and the Crypt Keeper. These characters enhanced each tale with dark humor and morbid wordplay. But like any good fad, horror comics came to an end due to a Senate subcommittee. Long story short, some politicians believed that horror comics were the cause of juvenile delinquency. Spoiler alert, they weren't. After the investigation, the industry created the Comics Code Authority and Comics Magazine Association, which banned publishers from using the words horror, crime, terror, and weird, which was a huge blow to EC Comics, whose best-selling titles featured the words horror, crime, terror, and weird. After a run of 27 issues, Tales from the Crypt ceased publication. But nearly 30 years later, in the mid-1980s, the hardcover reprints of Tales from the Crypt caught the attention of Joel Silver, the super producer behind Die Hard and Lethal Weapon.
I remember as a kid, I would devour these comic books. I mean, they were scary, they were funny, they were just so special.
Silver planned to make an anthology movie based on Tales from the Crypt, and he assembled a dream team, including Richard Donner, director of Superman and The Omen, Walter Hill, director of The Warriors and 48 Hours, and Robert Zemeckis, director of Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Long story short, they ditched the movie idea and pitched a series to HBO. If you're watching this video, you probably know what happened next. It became the series that defined HBO. The story goes that at the premiere screening, 2 crew members were talking and one of them said, "This is so good, I can't believe it's for TV." The other guy said, "It's not TV, it's HBO." As an anthology series, the show had a great gimmick. Most episodes were based on stories originally published in Tales from the Crypt. The series found the right balance of sly humor and graphic gore.
Roasting 15 people alive? Pretty rotten way to cover his ass.
Along with some occasional nudity.
Who knows?
Which we've blurred out here because we don't want to promote.
A substantial amount of juvenile delinquency and child crime.
The series also attracted some top-name talent with recognizable faces in every episode. Plus, some heavy hitters behind the scenes. The show gave a chance to some first-time directors like Tom Hanks, Michael J. Fox, and even Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the star of the show was a creepy puppet. Nope, not that one. No, not that one either.
Oh, hello, boars and ghouls.
We're talking about the Crypt Keeper. The host of the show was an undead ghoul based on the character from the comic. The Crypt Keeper is remembered for his awful puns.
I'm trying out a few recipes for my new Betty Crocker cookbook. Your pal the Crypt Keeper's quite the extreme skier. Looks like your pal the Crypt Keeper's in the fright of his life.
Forget dad jokes, he's got dead jokes. Sorry. In one episode, we even got the Crypt Keeper's origin story. He was born of 2 sideshow attractions in a traveling carnival.
Old Two-Face was my daddy, and the mummy was my mommy.
Let's meet the man behind the voice.
I'm John Cassier.
I'm the voice of the Crypt Keeper.
You might recognize his other work. He's one of the voices of Buster Bunny on Tiny Toons.
Oh, hiya, Bugs.
And appeared in a TV movie about the Three Stooges.
I didn't mean it. Love taps. Love taps.
The Crypt Keeper kept the series going longer than anyone expected.
Oh, hi there, fright fiends.
HBO had initially imagined the series would last for 3 seasons. They even planned for a big series finale for the last episode. But instead, after 3 seasons, the producers planned for a spin-off. Now remember, Tales from the Crypt was just one of many titles from EC Comics. So a spin-off seems pretty straightforward. If you could make a hit series out of one old comic book, why not create a new series inspired by another comic, like Two-Fisted Tales? That book featured pulpy adventures, the kind of tough guy fiction found in noir detective stories, shocking tales of homicide, adultery, and scandal. HBO's Tales from the Crypt had already dipped into some of these comics before. Season 2 relied on suspense stories for episodes like Dead Right and Four-Sided Triangle.
How many times I gotta tell you? You don't kill to help George beat him, but you don't kill him.
Season 3 of Tales from the Crypt featured a suspense story with Carrion Death, a great episode where Kyle MacLachlan plays a criminal trying to make a getaway despite being handcuffed to a dead policeman.
I didn't bust out of death row to end up like this.
These non-supernatural stories are decidedly different from your typical Tales from the Crypt. These are less kids' horror comic books and more smutty, sleazy narratives mixed with dark comedy. The pilot for this Tales from the Crypt spin-off was packaged as an anthology film. You know, like Creepshow. Or for that matter, like Tales from the Crypt, the British horror film which is made up of vignettes based on the comic books. There, we worked in a mention, just in case someone in the comments was going to say that we forgot about the 1972 movie. The result is Two-Fisted Tales, which positions itself as a decidedly masculine work of art focusing on guns, grit, courage, etc. The pilot movie is made up of 3 vignettes which deal with cowboys, hot rods, and war. Seems like a no-brainer. Launch a new series that's just like Tales from the Crypt, but made for guys who use biker chain wallets. So, what went wrong? For starters, none of the vignettes came from the comic book Two-Fisted Tales. The movie features a pair of new plot lines and one adaptation from shock suspense stories. With so many classics to choose from, why write something new? It's kind of like how the second Fletch movie isn't based on one of the many Fletch novels, but an original script that's not very good.
I apologize for my bellicosity. I've had a hernia operation.
So right off the bat, the choice of material doesn't make a lot of sense. Then there's the host.
What are you staring at?
Tales from the Crypt had the Crypt Keeper, a wisecracking goofball who enjoyed dressing up and having fun.
My next poem is a little experimental number I've been working on.
Two-Fisted Tales took a different approach. Meet Mr. Rush. Not to be confused with Mr. Rush from TV's Too Close for Comfort, who drew a comic strip about Cosmic Cow. The Two-Fisted Tales host is played by veteran character actor William Sadler. Sadler was something of a good luck charm for the Tales team. He starred in the very first episode of Tales from the Crypt. In that episode, titled The Man Who Was Death, he played the Man Who Was Death.
They put executions on TV be the highest rated show of all time.
William Sadler also appeared in 2 of the Tales from the Crypt movies. He co-starred in Demon Knight, then showed up as a mummy in Bordello of Blood. And in another episode of Tales from the Crypt, he reprised his role from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
There was an Elvis sighting there, so I figured I'd check it out, but it was just a fat guy in a sequin suit. I took him anyway.
But his Two-Fisted Tales hosting duties came with a different tone.
Well, I'm impressed, Maggot. You actually had the balls to stay the course.
Mr. Rush appears to be some kind of Old West gunslinger, and like the Crypt Keeper, he laughs at his own jokes, but his jokes are always at your expense.
You're a little Nancy boy, that's what you are.
In an episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, William Sadler revealed the inspiration behind his character.
I was trying to channel George C. Scott.
You
know?
Was it Buck Turgison, his character from Dr. Strangelove?
Exactly.
One where you got 20 million people killed, and the other where you got 150 million people killed.
If the Crypt Keeper is a class clown, then Mr. Rush is a gym teacher going through a bad divorce and taking it out on his students.
Look what I just found. Yeah, it's a pair of your wimpy old underwear.
It breaks my heart that series never got picked up, because that would have been a fun character to write for.
That would have been swell.
Two-Fisted Tales did not go to series. More on that later. Right now, let's take a look at the pilot. Again, it's an anthology film made up of 3 vignettes. Two-Fisted Tales kicks off with the moody Western tale, Showdown. Issue number 37 of Two-Fisted Tales contains a story called Showdown, written by Colin Dawkins with art by the great John Severin. But the Showdown segment from the Two-Fisted Tales pilot and Tales from the Crypt is a completely original story that has nothing to do with the comic. Like many Tales from the Crypt episodes, Showdown has some serious talent behind the camera. Frank Darabont wrote this segment while Richard Donner directed. Showdown was something of a reunion for the filmmaking pair, as Darabont wrote the Season 2 Tales from the Crypt episode The Ventriloquist Dummy, which Donner directed. Donner also directed the carnival-themed episode Dig That Cat, He's Real Gone, which starred the very 90s duo of Robert Wool and Joe Pantoliano.
When they dig me up, I'll be dead.
Showdown tells the tale of Billy Quintain, an outlaw literally haunted by the ghosts of the men he's killed. Quintain is played by Neil Giantoli, who you might recognize as Eddie Caputo in Child's Play. David Morse plays a Texas Ranger who gets gunned down by Billy. He killed Hack! But at least Morse got to work with Frank Darabont again in The Green Mile. Showdown takes on a supernatural flavor once Billy starts seeing visions of the men he killed.
It's been a long time, Billy.
Of all the segments in Two-Fisted Tales, Showdown is the creepiest. Richard Donner gives Billy's visions a haunting, dreamlike quality.
It's just the wind, Billy. Just the wind.
But the script is a little bland. It's your typical killer haunted by his evil deeds plotline.
You demons from the pit! You come to drag me off to hell!
There's even a mild twist where we learn Billy is also a ghost.
Now, it may interest you folks to know that this saloon has got its very own ghost, but I'm talking about the ghost of Billy Quintain himself.
Turns out the posse gunned down Billy after he killed David Morse.
And the moment that Tom bit the dust, that posse cut down Billy Quintain.
Showdown ends with Ghost Billy riding off into the sunset with the other cowboy ghosts. Then we get another interstitial of Mr. Rush taunting the viewer.
Damn, I can't believe you fell for that one, stupid.
Mr. Rush is basically the mortician in the Mad Dog McGree video game.
You better work on your sharpshooting, stranger. You only got 2 lives left.
After Fox declined to pick up Two-Fisted Tales as a series, Showdown aired as a Season 4 episode of Tales from the Crypt.
I call this prairie poison Showdown.
The second vignette in Two-Fisted Tales is the white-knuckle drag race story, King of the Road. Tom Holland is behind the camera for King of the Road, best known as the director of Child's Play. Fun fact, Kevin Yeager, the special effects guru who designed the Chucky doll, also created the Crypt Keeper puppet. Hold up, is the Crypt Keeper Chucky's dad? They have the same eyes. King of the Road lives up to its title with rockin' music by Warren, Werewolves of London, Zevon. Oh, and it also has Brad Pitt in it. Brad was no stranger to TV early in his career. Remember when he was on Growing Pains?
I sound like James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause.
A few months before Two-Fisted Tales aired, Brad had his breakout role as a sexy drifter in another road story, Thelma and Louise.
But I appreciate your time. You all have a good day, all right?
Pitt plays Billy, a psychotic driver looking to take on legendary road racer, the Iceman.
Now, you don't have to be modest with me, Iceman. You're a legend. Never lost a race. 8 years straight.
Only problem is the Iceman is now living the quiet life as a local sheriff.
You got the wrong guy.
Iceman is played by character actor Raymond J. Barry, who has some experience with misunderstandings.
The wrong kid died.
So Billy decides to romance Iceman's daughter.
Got your dad's eyes.
Did Brad Pitt use that line on Gwyneth Paltrow? Billy is the Needles to Iceman's Marty McFly.
What's the matter? Chicken?
And kidnaps Iceman's daughter to get him to race. But Iceman pulls a fast one during the race. And Hothead Billy goes up in flames. And this wouldn't be the last time Brad Pitt had trouble with cars. Hands down, Brad Pitt is the best thing in King of the Road. His unhinged performance hints at roles to come in films like California and 12 Monkeys. Fun fact, Brad Pitt starred in Two-Fisted Tales, Cool World, and A River Runs Through It, all in the same year. Like the other segments of Two-Fisted Tales, King of the Road aired as an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
I call this nasty nugget King of the Road.
Yellow is the final segment of Two-Fisted Tales, and it's definitely the standout. It's a combat story set in World War I, starring Kirk Douglas and his son. No, not that son. Say hello to Eric Douglas.
All my life, everything I've ever done was to make you happy.
He's like the Chet Hanks of the Douglas clan. Rounding out the cast is Dan Aykroyd in a dramatic role.
Looks like von Furstenberg is putting all his resources in his left flank, General.
And the MVP is beloved character actor Lance Henriksen, who chews up the scenery as a frantic sergeant making his way across the battlefield.
Where's the lieutenant?
He even delivers the titular line.
Just spit it out, man. He's yellow, sir.
This is a story about what happens when soldiers disobey their commanding officers rather than face certain death.
I saved the company. If we had continued up that hill, none of us would be alive now.
You might have noticed that this is very similar to Stanley Kubrick's film Paths of Glory. Both stories take place in the trenches of World War I. Both involve a scouting patrol where a cowardly drunken officer panics and accidentally causes the death of one of his own men. He is confronted by the surviving soldier.
It's his word against mine, right?
It's my word against George, you know.
And both stories star Kirk Douglas. That's no coincidence. Douglas was sought after because director Robert Zemeckis loved Paths of Glory and wanted the actor to appear in this episode. And yes, I said episode, not movie. The script for Yellow was adapted from an issue of Suspense Stories #1, and it was supposed to be the series finale for Tales from the Crypt. For the first 2 seasons, the show went over budget, so HBO was going to sunset the anthology at the end of its 3rd season. Yellow was going to be the big finish. Remarkably, the producers got the budget under control during the 3rd season, and Tales from the Crypt was greenlit for another year.
And it's all over before you can really enjoy it.
Months before Two-Fisted Tales even aired, Yellow played as the season 3 finale of Tales from the Crypt.
I mean, war's a great equal opportunity destroyer.
Was Yellow a backdoor pilot? No, not really, but it was recycled, like the way the clipping from a tree might be used to grow a new plant. Here's some insider info from Tales from the Crypt writer-producer Alan Katz.
Yellow, for a couple of seconds, was going to be the last episode of Tales from the Crypt ever, but when the decision was finally made that HBO was going to order more episodes, it became a celebration. They were going to do Yellow as double duty, as part of Two-Fisted Tales, but also as part of this Crypt episode.
Yellow showed what Two-Fisted Tales could have been. It's distinct from Tales from the Crypt because there are no vampires, no mad science, no voodoo, just a harsh reminder that war is hell. Yellow has become a fan favorite. It's one of the top-rated entries on IMDb, second only to What's Cookin'. Fans will remember this infamous episode. It's the one where Christopher Reeve turns Meatloaf into Meatloaf.
Hey, you know, it's not bad.
So, Two-Fisted Tales did not go to series. Since we couldn't find any information about why the network passed on this spin-off, we talked with Tales from the Crypt writer and producer Alan Katz. What official reason did Fox give for passing on Two-Fisted Tales?
Whatever audience Fox was looking for, I guess Two-Fisted Tales didn't fit into that particular demographic, which is strange because they were looking for guys, they were looking for men. You ask the question in search of a good reason, why would they not do this thing? And I'm simply saying you might be asking for something that simply doesn't exist anywhere in this universe. Maybe part of the problem was it was timing. If this had happened a year later, when Crypt was suddenly a very hot show and we were getting, incredible reviews and movie stars to do it, a year later, I bet you Fox would have done it. And that's why I think Fox, they did relent. We made W.E.I.R.D for them.
Which brings us to the next would-be spinoff.
Fox presents a world premiere motion picture, W.E.I.R.D. Married with Children's Ed O'Neill brings together the greatest minds on Earth.
The government has promised to leave us alone.
To find the secrets of the future.
The pilot for Weird World aired as a made-for-TV movie on Fox in 1995. The usual gang of Tales from the Crypt producers were behind the scenes. Director William Malone was also a Tales vet, having helmed the episode Only Skin Deep. Weird World is a departure from the other Tales from the Crypt spin-offs. Instead of an anthology show, it's a dark sci-fi drama that's like The X-Files meets Melrose Place.
Little surprises run every curve.
The pilot follows the personal and professional lives of a group of scientists at a top-secret government think tank. Ed O'Neill stars as Dr. Manakian, the head of the Wilson Emery Institute for Research and Development, aka WEIRD. Kind of like when Al Bundy led an acronym organization.
National Organization of Men Against Amazonian Masterhood.
According to producer Alan Katz, Fox made Ed O'Neill appear in Weird World, and the Married with Children star wanted to do the pilot, quote, about as much as he wanted a proctological exam. Rounding out the cast were some familiar faces. Twin Peaks' Dana Ashbrook plays an arrogant WEIRD staffer who isn't afraid to kill in the name of science.
Science is a contact sport. And Eddie here, well, he made the ultimate sacrifice.
Paula Marshall of Snoops and Cupid fame adds Weird World to her resume of failed shows. And keep an eye out for Tony Cox and Marshall Bell from Total Recall. The pilot movie was designed to launch a weekly TV series based on EC Comics' Weird Science.
But we couldn't call it Weird Science because there was a movie called Weird Science. That hurt us a little bit. Weird World was a catastrophe of its own.
The Weird World pilot hit some budgetary snags.
We budgeted out at about $3.5 million. And then F.A. Miller called me and said, here, we have a problem here. We just penciled out the budget. It's at $3.5 million. We have $1.8 million to make it. You got to start rewriting. We cut the script back to the barest minimum because, we wrote here because we didn't know we had to write for here. No one told us that. If we knew we had to write here, we would have written for here.
Weird World lives up to its name with a dense plot that includes time travel, robots, youth serums, and other wild concepts.
Oh, can you imagine the things we could do if we knew the future?
The mix of dark humor and morally gray characters is in keeping with Tales from the Crypt. Weird World plays like a traditional drama, stuffed with too many characters and soapy subplots. It might have worked better as a sci-fi anthology show hosted by Ed O'Neill's villainous scientist. Viewed today, Weird World is less Tales from the Crypt and more 90s X-Files knockoff. But if you're into Ed O'Neill channeling Dr. Evil while looking like he's in a B-movie version of The Matrix, Weird World may be worth a watch.
You irritate me, Dylan. Not always, but just enough to keep me somewhat irregular.
While Weird World never made it to series, Tales from the Crypt did have a spin-off, a forgotten science fiction show. In the summer of 1997, Perversions of Science premiered on HBO. Robert Zemeckis, Walter Hill, and the rest of the Tales from the Crypt producers were behind this half-hour anthology show that adapted stories from Weird Science, Weird Fantasy, and other sci-fi tales from the EC catalog. On the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, producer Gil Adler revealed that the producers had a concept and not much else. Robert Zemeckis was busy directing Contact at the time, so Adler had to flesh out Perversions of Science on his own.
But Bob, there is no show. I mean, be candid with me, Bob. You know there is no show. And he goes, yeah, you'll figure it out. And that's how Perversions happened.
The plan was for Perversions of Science to be a science fiction anthology series like The Outer Limits. Tales from the Crypt composer Danny Elfman returned to pen the Mars Attacks-esque theme song. The opening sequence is a wild journey that starts with a piece of popcorn and ends inside the metallic breast of a female robot. Yes, the Crypt Keeper-esque host for Perversions of Science was a sexy fembot named Chrome.
I hate to admit it, but I'm perfect.
Instead of awesome puppetry, Chrome was brought to life through decidedly not awesome 90s CGI. Chrome dispensed puns in the episode intros a la The Crypt Keeper, except her one-liners were less dad jokes and more innuendo-laced Playboy party jokes.
Size does matter. The bigger, the badder. If it's too small, it barely makes a dent.
The Crypt Keeper threw to eerie comic books where his grisly tales ostensibly took place.
I call it Till Death Do We Part.
To get inside a Perversions of Science episode, Chrome took the viewer inside her robot bosom where data files of the tales were stored. Yes, Perversions of Science took place inside of a sexbot's boob. That's weirder than St. Elsewhere existing inside Tommy Westfall's snow globe. As with Tales from the Crypt, Walter Hill directed the pilot episode of Perversions of Science. Dream of Doom finds David Carradine and Lolita Davidovich in an eerie tale about a man who can't distinguish between dreams and reality.
I'm your wife. Who do you think I am?
I don't know. Jesus, it's just another dream.
While not as star-studded as Tales from the Crypt, Perversions of Science features genre greats like Jeffrey Combs, Ron Perlman, Paul Williams, and Will Wheaton. And since it's a show from 1997, there are also episodes featuring Dr. Joyce Brothers, Elizabeth Berkley, and Joey Buttafuoco.
Found him at the movies. Some Rock Hudson film.
Talent behind the camera included Toby Hooper, Sean Astin, and Russell Mulcahy. William Shatner directed and starred in the episode Boxed In, which co-stars Kevin Pollak as an astronaut who gets a little too attached to his sex bot. Literally.
You're sick.
Boxed In is the only Perversions of Science episode not based on an EC comic. The script was adapted from a short story in the National Lampoon, penned by Animal House co-writer Chris Miller. If you're wondering if Kevin Pollak does his Shatner impression in the episode, wonder no longer.
Space. The final frontier. My ass.
Like Tales from the Crypt, Perversions of Science alternated between scares and goofy camp, often in the same episode. Episodes also had twist endings. In The Exile, David Warner tries to rehabilitate a murderer who turns out to be, wait for it, Adolf Hitler.
What about the inhabitants of the planet?
Oh, I wouldn't worry. There's just one man. How much damage could he possibly do?
Though the writers went to the "it was aliens all along" ending way too often.
All goes as planned.
Several episodes leaned into wacky comedy. Panic finds the very 1997 duo of Jason Lee and Jamie Kennedy in a fun riff on the War of the Worlds.
Hey, take it easy, John!
In Ultimate Weapon, a hapless pair of shape-shifting aliens try to impregnate Heather Langenkamp. Spoiler alert, one of the aliens gets pregnant instead. And like any good late-night cable anthology series, there was plenty of titillation.
If it wasn't for you, Billy, I would never pass this class.
If you had Yancey Butler in skin-tight leather on your 90s anthology show bingo card, congrats. HBO promoted Perversions of Science with some eye-catching ads, but reviews were tepid and the ratings dwindled as the season went on. After a single 10-episode season, Perversions of Science was canceled. Alan Katz shared his theory on why the series needed a better host.
The computer character is just awful. Sexual humor is really tough because you can cross the line very quickly into boring. She had the same problem that the Crypt Keeper had in the first 2 seasons. He had no personality. There was no way she was going to have a personality because she was a computer. There was going to be nothing to explore. And so it was a dead-end choice at the jump. If you up the franchise player, you don't have anything because there's no organizing principle. They took the joke over a character, and it died.
The same summer that Perversions of Science aired, HBO also premiered the gritty prison drama, Oz. Unsurprisingly, HBO decided to renew the critically acclaimed Oz instead of the sex robot show. Thus, the "it's not TV, it's HBO" network said goodbye to its racy anthology show past, and hello to its prestige TV future. Although it wouldn't be the last time Adolf showed up on an HBO series.
And let's get started.
While Two-Fisted Tales and Perversions of Science failed, the Crypt Keeper dipped his bony toes into other forms of media. In 1995, Tales from the Crypt made the jump to the big screen with Demon Knight.
No one's ever brought a Demon Knight over the other side before. Well, not in one piece anyway.
Followed by Bordello of Blood, a film that answers the question, what if sexy vampires battled Dennis Miller?
Cha-ching!
Can you tell it was made in 1996?
You wouldn't shoot these now, would you?
The direct-to-DVD zombie flick Ritual was the final Tales from the Crypt movie. In his intro, the Crypt Keeper channeled Adrian Brody on SNL.
What up, my people? Welcome to Jamaica, man.
Big up, man. Big up Jamaican, massive. Big up.
Fun fact, From Dusk Till Dawn and The Frighteners were almost Tales from the Crypt movies. The Crypt Keeper was also a hit with kiddies on Saturday morning.
So until next shriek, boys and ghouls.
Not only did he have his own cartoon, he also had his own game show.
That swamp is full of snakes, crocodiles, and deadly flesh-eating piranha fish.
Ah, the days when violent media for adults became children's entertainment icons. The Crypt Keeper even had his own rap.
This is the Keeper, for I have a tasty treat, inviting you all to a feast.
Just like Freddy Krueger.
Don't fall asleep or you'll wake up dead.
If you're looking for more recent Tales from the Crypt media, check out the podcast How Not to Make a Movie. Alan Katz and Gil Adler give you the inside look at how Bordello of Blood was a movie no one wanted to make.
Bob Z told Universal that one way they could keep him was by buying the first student script the two Bobs wrote while at USC Film School, Bordello of Blood. Universal agreed. They bought that script for $500,000.
It's a fascinating look at how media gets made, and Bordello of Blood was a perfect storm. These days, Tales from the Crypt is a cult favorite, so it isn't surprising that a modern reboot was attempted. In 2016, it was announced that TNT was developing a new version of Tales from the Crypt with someone who knows their way around a twisty horror story, M. Night Shyamalan. Unfortunately, rights issues prevented the use of the Crypt Keeper, and the reboot ended up deader than a cheating spouse on a Tales from the Crypt episode. Hey, maybe it's time to reboot Perversions of Science for the Black Mirror era. Chrome could use the work.
If you want more, all you have to do is come again.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to Atomic Abe's YouTube channel for more Behind the Backdoor Pilot and more Anthology of Anthology TV shows, including our video about the failed Twilight Zone spinoff starring Carol Burnett.
There's immediate seating in the lodging balcony.